All right, so we are back with a follow-up episode of Living Life Off-Grid. You guys had questions, and we'd love to answer your questions. We appreciated how much interest y'all took with our life change, and we did want to clarify some more things for you if that would be helpful. So anyways, I guess I was just jumping right in, but I was supposed to do an episode intro.
That seemed like a good intro. I will say this, folks, if you do enjoy this podcast, if you're able to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on Spotify or wherever you might listen to podcasts, that helps our podcast and it helps us a lot. If you watch us on YouTube, we would love it if you subscribe to our channel. That helps grow our reach. And so, yeah, we really hope this podcast is an encouragement to you and to your family. Obviously, as of late, it's going to be kind of heavy with like lifestyle as it pertains to, living in a tent off grid. But of course, that's not the scenario for each and every one of your families, nor do we anticipate being that the scenario for our family for very long. And so we really do want to, hopefully, now who's doing the long intro? Holy smokes.
Goodness, I just sucked a bug up my nose.
Yeah, there's one on your headband. We want to continue growing in things, in principles, in, beliefs, and in fundamentals that regardless of the season of life we're in or you're in, they are solidifying in your faith and in your family and in your marriage. And so, again, we're probably going to be in a pretty good season here of very practical, specific things as it pertains to our life. But hopefully we're continuing to grow with the literature we're reading, being in God's Word, grow in ways that go beyond just living in a tent off-grid. Is that okay? Good? All right, let's get this thing rolling.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Yeah, so this podcast, we are not transitioning to a lifestyle podcast or a living off-grid podcast. This is just one episode we're following up with. And as we always do, we will give you guys updates about our life as we go along. But the content isn't changing, so we don't want you guys to stress out about that and be like, what? Now we're there are certain elements of our life we still want to keep private. We always have kept elements private. We're getting more and more so that way. So clearly when we're sitting out in the bushes, we have to tell you guys, hey, something's changed. Because you're going to see something's changed. And you might hear something's changed. Like we were lucky with the audio last week. I don't know. Hopefully our audio stays good. Hopefully the lighting stays good. If it bothers you at any point, just know that we're doing the best we can. And you can always just opt to listen to it if the sun's in our eyes or something like that. You don't have to watch us.
It is tricky because I do feel like early morning or late in the evening would be the most consistent lighting, the best time to figure out lighting. But that just hasn't worked for our family's schedule, for our kids' schedule. And so here we are once again midday with the sun beating down on us through the leaves. And we try to position the chairs in a way where there's they're shaded. But then, 10 minutes later, obviously, that sun keeps moving and the trees don't. And
Elisha's done a great job setting up all this stuff. It's a lot of work to have it be a nomadic podcast setup. So anyways, I'm really thankful for the effort that he puts in so that we could still do these episodes.
Yeah, I'm grateful we can continue doing this. And that was always a part of the plan, even when I know we're going to get to some of these questions.
Oh, yeah.
When we had first discussed moving into the tent and getting out here onto the property, the non-negotiables were, obviously we needed to be united. We wanted to be a good, comfortable, safe environment for our children. But we also wanted to keep the podcast going. I needed to be able to have a place to work from, and so internet was one of the first things we looked into. And a generator, being able to get power from a generator. And so we ordered Starlink. Some people asked about that, how are you getting internet? So we've got Starlink, and then we have to run our generator in order to get internet, which honestly I kind of like, because it's you've got very clear working hours where you're all right, I'm firing up the old Jenny, and it's time to clock into work. You get work done, and then you turn the generator off, and you're kind of, tuned out again. From work and from the internet. And so that's been that solution to that. And that was one of those non-negotiables. We were okay, can we keep the podcast going? We'll have a place to, continue working and providing from. And so anyways, yeah.
Yeah, that was a question someone asked was, were you guys homeschooling and working during the moving, packing, all that time? And then are you continuing that out here? And yeah, those are like non-negotiable things in our family that we want to make sure. One, I mean, Elisha provides for us, and that doesn't stop when we decide to make a lifestyle change. So the lifestyle change has to be within that parameter of, is he going to continue working? That's not an option. We aren't just independently wealthy. Yeah. So there's that. And then same with the kids' homeschool. It's like, that's very important for me, because you only have so many years with them, and their daily academics do matter in the long run, that those little precepts over precepts. And so that's really important to us, and that's something that we'll consider with any lifestyle change we do, is, are we able to continue those things on? So those are happening. And we did get some concerns or questions like, you guys haven't really mentioned God. Was God in this decision? Was he speaking? Did he speak to you clearly about this? And at first, I was kind of defensive, and I thought, well, we're Christians. Clearly, it should be assumed that every decision we make is going to be subject to the authority of God. And if we feel like he's clearly closing a door, we aren't just going to break out a hatchet and break through it. But that said, I did realize, well, you know what? We weren't very clear in our last episode that we were seeking and we were praying, and we are seeking unity together as a couple with the Holy Spirit. And I also think that's important as Christians, that we do communicate, that we don't make decisions outside of asking the Lord what he would have for our lives. So I want to get better at communicating that part of the process.
Yeah, you're right. It seems like that question is, for most people, is usually raised around the time of big life-altering decisions. But it should be, as Christians, the way we go into every single day is, in all your ways. You know, the Proverbs say, acknowledge him. In all your ways, acknowledge God, and he will direct your paths. Or what is it? Yeah, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And we are his children. We are his ambassadors. We are blood bought. We belong to him. We are a peculiar people. We're set apart. We're his royal priesthood, his holy nation, that the Bible calls us. And so it's not like, okay, now that we're making a big life-altering decision, we should seek the Lord's counsel, and we should seek his word, and we should look at his hierarchy. It's like, oh man, as Christians, the way we spend every dollar, the way we talk to our spouse, the way we respond to our employer, all of those things should be in submission to Christ's reign and his rule over us and over the earth. And then we should be submitted to God's word and how that instructs us to behave in all those different situations. And of course, we're going to err, right? We're going to fall short of being able to do that perfectly. And we go back to God's word and look for more clarity. We seek forgiveness. We repent. And we do like lean heavily on the Holy Spirit's leading in our life. And again, you know, yeah, anyway, so I'm grateful you said that and brought that up. I hadn't seen that question, but my hope would be that that's how we, at least, that's how we would intend to live every day of our life, you know, in every moment and every word, that it would be submitted to Christ's leading, to his reign, to the Holy Spirit working in us and through us. And yeah, sometimes it's hard for me to know like how to answer that question when it's very pointed, like, do you know God is leading in this, or how do you know, or are you doing this outside of his will? Or, you know, some of you ask some really pointed questions with that, and it's kind of like, well, I guess if you were to go through Elisha's and my decision-making process, we both prayed for peace in the scenario. You know, there was a time when I thought it would be fun to move into a wall tent, and Elisha did not feel that would be wise for our family. And as the leader of our family, I dropped it because he didn't have, you know, as he was the leader of our family, I dropped it because he didn't have peace and didn't think that was the direction we should go in. When he came to me and was like, hey, we ought to do this. It's like I had this idea out of nowhere. Like it just came to me. Well, we were in it was a couple months later. It was a different stage of life we were in. The weather had warmed up a little bit, and I was like immediately on board, and they're delivering a package. Oh, got it. And we both felt total peace of like, yeah, we should see if we should move forward with this. So Elisha and I, we do pray together as a couple. And I feel like one way that we just make all of our decisions is, okay, well, we're going to start taking steps, and things would have to fall into place for this to happen. If they don't fall into place for this to happen, then we won't take those steps. And I feel like that's
I just have so much faith in God's sovereignty. Just us getting this property was a part of God's sovereign will. So many things had to line up for us to even get this property. And then for things to line up, our house had to sell. We weren't going to move out here without our house selling. And so that was in the Lord's hands. Like every part of this has been in the Lord's hands. And at any point he could have closed the door. And so I feel a lot of peace being like, Elisha and I feel peace as a couple. We've been united as a couple. No one in our lives that is close to us has come to us and been like, this is a terrible idea. What are you guys doing? Or brought scripture to us in any way. And so I guess to me, that was God's blessing on it.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like how we have to walk in the 21st century. God isn't coming to us, and most of the time he hasn't come to me, at least in a dream or something very glaring, or say, hey, move here, go to Bethlehem, like we see in scripture. And I know that can happen, but that wasn't our experience here. But at the same time, I absolutely feel we're in the center of God's will.
Yeah, I do think it's easy, and it seems like it's kind of common in today's Christianity to really emphasize certain miracles over other miracles, or certain leadings that the Lord, certain ways that God leads us over other ways that he leads us. And so, if somebody hears the audible voice of God say something, it's like we make a huge deal out of it, but then we'll just take for granted that he's caused the sun to rise this morning by his perfect sovereign will, and he's had us in this place. And that is like just as much of a crazy miracle. And so we'll disregard each breath that he has foreordained, right? Like Colossians says, he's in all things, and by him all things hold together. And so when we move our fingers, and when we use our muscles to pick things up, and our body's functioning, it's like it's a crazy miracle that's happening. And yet we don't want to acknowledge, or we don't seem to acknowledge that, and we look for these things that might seem more glamorous or very personalized. We really, really like personalized, what we would call, words or miracles. And nobody wants like this general revelation in nature, or the special revelation of God's word that's to all of his people, and to acknowledge the miracle of that. And again, I think it is pretty cool when people have a unique, inclination from the Lord, and they're able to say, man, the Lord like showed me this thing, and sure enough it happened. You're like, oh, praise the Lord. That is great. But I do think it's kind of a not appropriate to elevate those things beyond just the general miracles that God is ordaining every single millisecond of every day. And just the fact that we woke up, and have breath and have life, we get to live as his children, is a miracle that we want to acknowledge and live in the reality of, and be grateful for.
Yeah, and you mentioned, scripture and nature, and I do think that those are two big things just in general we can principally apply to our lives when making decisions. We know that we're making a bad decision when God's hierarchy and his priority list is out of line. Yeah. And we felt that before, and it's felt very wrong before. And it's very clear that we're out of line. So sometimes things aren't, like you said, a special direct word to like, you need to move into a tent, or you shouldn't move into a tent. Yeah. But it's going, okay, is this going to be healthy for our children? Is it going to be healthy for our marriage? Is it going to be healthy are we still going to be able to be involved in our community, or are we going to totally withdraw from that? Are we still going to be able to be a part of what the Lord has us be a part of, or no? Yep. And when it's yes to all of those things, we feel very clear moving forward. So anyways, that is, but I do want to get clear that the Lord is a part of every decision-making process that we make, and I want to communicate that better, because that is important as Christians, and we didn't communicate that. So
we love live music in our home. I think you would love live music in your home if you don't already enjoy it in your home. And that's why we made Voperg Music Academy. Check out the coupon below, and you get a special discount for being a listener of this podcast, and you can bring live music into your home. Piano, guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele. If any of those instruments sound like fun to you to learn, or to have your children learn, go check it out.
Anyways, you guys help us grow. You do. And bringing up those things. I'm going to get I would love to get a little bit into glorifying hardship, because not yet. But that was
That sounds fun.
a
I'm excited
concern
to
that
glorify hardship.
people had, is that what Elisha and I are doing are glamorizing or glorifying hardship. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. But a few really practical questions real quick. We
Okay.
can popcorn in here. One, where are the kids when you guys are recording a podcast?
Yeah, so right now they're playing Lego in the tent.
Yeah.
And that's actually been a fun thing. Every day we found more of a rhythm and we found more of a routine. I mean, we're only a couple weeks now into living out here. And because we're outside so much, we're, in the water so much, it's like a treat now when the kids get to go in to the tent, and the inside of our tent, hopefully, I think you're going to show the Get It All Done Club how that's all laid out. It's really cozy. We have a carpet in there. There's furniture, and Lego is now like a really fun treat, more so than it was, I guess, back at our home. And so they're playing Lego now, and Lionel's sleeping.
Yeah, we have a little like pup tent.
Yes.
That we set up so we have a couple pack and plays. We have one in the main tent where we all sleep together at night so we can all be close because we do have big animals on the property. And then we have a little pup tent right outside the tent so that kids can take a nap in there or something like that. So that's where the baby is. And sometimes when we record the podcasts, the kids are out, like we could see them out here playing Capture the Flag or riding their bikes. So sometimes the older four out there are older four, 7, 6, 5, and 3, and they play really well together. And then sometimes if the tent's shady and it's cool, then they would love that opportunity to go in there and play. So that's where the children are. We see them come in and out, and they're always within earshot and eye shot. What do you use for toilet? This was a big one.
Yeah, well,
not very pretty.
Yeah, that's still so we've got a compost toilet set up right now, but it's not very permanent. That's kind of like the next big project is building an outhouse and getting more of a civilized compost toilet set up. Right now, the kids do great on it. We do. It works for us. There is a little bit of I don't know. That you lose a little bit of your dignity, I feel like. Each time you have to go to the bathroom and so you go try to find. I mean, we're modest and we're private, with it. There's plenty of places.
It's behind you'll see, but it's behind a bunch of bins. So Elisha and I are. The kids often need help. So, they're all little. And so that's not a big deal. But yeah, we would like to build a structure around it and make it a long-term compost toilet because even when we have a permanent dwelling here on the property, it will be great for the kids to just be able to run there if they're in the back of the property and use the bathroom, or guests to be able to use the bathroom there. So it's nice to have a little option. So that's the next build that we're doing.
Yes.
Right now, it's like this bucket toilet seat situation with wood shavings, and it does a good job. But it's not as long-term as we would like. It's not as private as we would like. What do we do for showering?
So we've got a creek on the property that is great. It's cool, clear, so refreshing. And we've got bench soap. So that's the kids and me. You've done that a couple times. You can say what you do. Yeah, because you've got the bougie set up.
I do. So we have no shower on the property. And so we go to the lake every day, and that is where, because it's just summertime, the lake's a few minutes away from our home, and so that's where the kids, I feel like, mainly get their baths, and then I rinse off every day there. But then once every 5 days, 4 to 5 days, we have campgrounds close to us. I drive over there, and I take a nice, long, hot shower. I wash my hair. I do the whole 9 yards. So that's about once a week, maybe twice a week, and I greatly enjoy that. Thankfully, I do have hair that can go a very long time without needing to be washed, and so I don't start feeling grungy till day 4 or 5, and then I'm like, okay, we need some help here. So we are kind of going all on natural with some of the stuff, but I'd say we rinse off every day with soap, clean the main troubled areas.
Yeah, that is the nice thing about being up here in North Idaho. The creeks, the rivers, and even right now still the lakes, they're so clear, refreshing.
We have really nice water here in the north.
So great.
So, yeah, depending on where you live in the state or in the country, or even in the world, it can be hard to picture the climate that we're in. So like even when it's really hot here, like we've had 100-degree days all this last week. That's really hot. You know, we can't be in our tent during those days, but then it cools down in the evening. So around 6 or 7, it cools down. By the time we're going to bed at 8 or 9, the tent's totally cool. And there's no humidity in the air, or very little humidity. So we aren't dealing with that. We aren't just like sweating it out. The babies aren't just sweating it out. It's still totally cool to be outside. Like it's totally doable.
Yes.
You just find shade or water. And so that's what we do in the heat of the day. We kind of get our work done in the morning, and then Elisha and I do more stuff in the evening. He'll do work and I'll kind of tidy up the house. So anyways, that's our shower situation. So yeah, I mean, we aren't the 2 shower a day lifestyle we used to have. You know, I would not get in bed before having a shower every single night at home. But it's been a fun bonding experience.
Yes.
For
Yes.
Elisha and I.
Yeah. I think we're
still very clean.
Yeah. We care about hygiene. And I guess you'd have to ask the friends that we see at church, you know, and at small group, whether or not we stink, because to each other, I don't think we care about hygiene. You know, we still have deodorant and we still use soap every day. Yeah.
And have perfume. And I don't know. I feel soap. It's going good, but we have had to adjust there. What are your, privacy and intimacy? This is a big one. This was also a big one when we lived in the trailer, because we did live in when I say trailer, it was a fifth wheel. It was, I think, 27 feet. We had no doors or anything in the fifth wheel. 10 million times harder than living in a tent.
Yep.
For me. Anyways, but privacy and intimacy.
Privacy, I guess it's just the same principles, I guess, that you would have in a house. You know, it's just like you make sure you change when nobody's looking or nobody's around, or if you need to change, you tell the kids to go outside of the tent. And again, there's actually lots of it's not like we're living in a wide open field with no, barriers. There's plenty of foliage, small trees, big trees. And so even if everyone's in the tent, you need to change, you can go find a place where nobody can see you in 2 seconds.
Yeah. So really I'm the only one that changes consistently or whatever, where the kids all go outside the tent and, Yeah. And then I don't even know when you change. You just seem to always have.
I know. It's kind of a magic. I've got my magic wardrobe.
Magic show, yeah. I feel like the kids kind of have to work around me a little bit. But I did get a couple nightgowns before moving out here that have really, I felt like, made it easier for me. I don't know, being up and down in the middle of the night and all around. So to just be more modest. So I transitioned kind of some of my sleepwear. So that's been good. And then in terms of intimacy, people have been doing this for centuries in close quarters, or being creative with just being creative. So I don't know. I mean, it's really...
Yeah, it's a big world, It's
it's a big world.
It is.
Yes.
And so there's,
And we haven't strung up a sheet yet. I do think we might get a little divider sheet that we'll put, for a little longer term solution between blocking off Elisha's and my bed and the baby's bed, and then kind of separating the kids' room, that I can kind of clip up with maybe shower hangers or something, and then unclip in the morning.
Nice.
So we might do that for our room, kind of make it a little bit more of a bedroom. But honestly, it just hasn't been an issue, and it's been a fun adventure. So
yeah, I think it's probably good, from time to time for marriages to have to get out of their normal flow or routine with that. Because it does make it more of an adventure, like you said. You have to, we still have a car, right? We still have nature. It's a big property, and so I think that's made it fun.
We go to bed quite a bit after the kids. They're all asleep, and so while I would love a sheet or something like that, it's just you have to be a little more discreet. But anyways, it's not a big deal. So a lot of people are asking, they had questions and concerns about the creek drying up, or tons of snow, telling us how much snow we get. And here's the cool thing. We lived in this climate for the last 5 years. So we're very familiar, or 4.5, something like that. So we're very familiar with the patterns of the seasons here. and when it rains, how much snow we get, how hot it gets in the summer. So it's not like we moved to totally out of state and are getting really taken off guard by like different bugs, different heat. Like we know it gets to be 100 degrees for like a couple weeks in the summer, but that's it. So you know if you can survive those 2 weeks, you'll be good, kind of. Same thing with we've owned this property for 1.5 years now, and so we've been out here in every season. So we know that the creek never dries up, you know, so we aren't stressed about that. We know it doesn't have serious flooding. And we also know people in this area who have lived on this creek for years longer than we have. So same with the big game. We don't have a lot of fears with that. We have neighbors that have little kids that have lived here for, again, multiple years, and have informed us with how it's been out here. And so we're very prepared, I feel like, and aware of like what the dangers are, what they aren't, how comfortable we can be with the kids, how far we can let them go out of our sight, stuff like that. Not to say anything can happen at any time.
I don't know if we're fully prepared, but I do think we're generally aware.
Generally aware.
Yeah.
That would be a good term. Like, there's other cities, and that was a big reason why we chose to live here. It's because we actually have community out here already, and we had a knowledge base that we could just move straight into, and I would be a lot more intimidated moving out onto some property where it's like, I have no clue. Are there bears here? Are there, have there been issues with, you know, food getting eaten, or what are the bugs? What's the wildlife like? All those things. How close do they come to humans? So we had a lot of working knowledge coming to this space.
Yes.
And we're going to learn a lot more, obviously, but that's given us a lot of confidence, and not a lot has taken us off guard yet.
Yeah. It's been really, again, I do think, who knows how, you know, safe or responsible of a decision this was, but it's something that I certainly strongly considered, was as the, you know, leader, the protector,
really seriously,
the protector and the provider of our home. I was like, I do not want to put my family in danger. And even I think figuring out the work situation where I didn't have to leave every single day from the beginning was important to me, even though Katie would be totally game for that. She said that, she's like, hey, like if you need to go get an office, if you need to go, you know, away for work, like you're all for it, but I'm not at that comfort zone yet. And so I really wanted to be able to be present here on the property as much as possible every day. And so I wanted to have a good work set up here just to kind of familiarize myself with the day in and day out flow. Because even though we were familiar with the property, we hadn't obviously lived here and spent, you know, numerous nights and, you know, all day. And so you want to get a bit of a pattern for the wildlife. And obviously that their pattern will change as the seasons change. But it's...
we just had an elk herd last night in our backyard.
Yeah.
Like how far away was that from the tent? Like,
oh man, I want to be realistic here because maybe I'd say like 30 yards, you know? So yeah.
There's a
50 or 60 feet, I'm guessing. Like, yeah, that was crazy. That really was. And that was the most like dramatic thing we've had come that close. You know, there's deer all day on our property and wild turkey. Turkey will show up like on the porch. Yes.
They're just everywhere.
They're here, you know, all day, every day. And then like in the evening, you'll see the occasional coyote run through. But this was the first time having like, you know, that felt significant. Just the volume, the sound that it created with them running through, you know, our creek just behind our tent was pretty noteworthy. So anyways, yeah. And so I was glad that I was like here for that. Right. And so anyways, I think we treat safety, I don't want to say we treat it crazy seriously. Like we take it seriously. We don't want anyone to get hurt. I don't want to put my family in harm's way or in peril, when it comes to the climate or when it comes to wildlife or to, you know, even drowning, hazards, because this creek, there are parts of it that are certainly a drowning hazard for our young children. And so we are extremely vigilant with where our kids go and what the boundaries are, and just always being aware of where they're at in proximity to the water.
Yeah, big reason why we haven't actually cleared out, because that's been a concern too. We haven't cleared out a lot of the brush around the creek because we are living back close towards it right now. We kind of have one path that's an access path to a section of the creek that's only about 2 or 3 inches deep. And that's the only place that our younger children can get down to without getting stickers or getting caught in the underbrush and crying for help.
Yes.
And so we like it that way right now, just because it's we want to minimize the access and keep them away from the deep spots, and obviously still knowing where the kids are. Like our older children who can swim know to alert us if someone's wandering off.
Right.
But we haven't had anyone desire to get down to the creek in the deep spots because they get off the path and usually get stuck. So
yes, yeah, you start hearing their cries because
they're super happy.
Right, they're in stickers or something.
So anyways, how do you keep meat chilled? That's a good question, because you guys know the whole Good Ranchers thing. You're like, how on earth are you doing that? And you just have to eat it within like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So anyways, we have 2 big ice chests. We fill them with ice consistently. And for the most part, we just buy enough food for like 4 or 5 days, max 5 days. And then just eat through it, kind of like you would when you were camping.
Yeah.
So, and then when our Good Ranchers meat comes, we have people over, we host.
Yeah.
We eat meat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And sometimes we give it back away to a friend that was unusually nice that week.
Yeah.
Okay, flies, mosquitoes, ticks, bugs. What are you guys living with there in terms of
Kind of all the above, except for, mosquitoes, far less mosquitoes than I anticipated. And I'm wondering if that's going to get worse this later in the summer and then early fall.
Yeah,
'Cause I remember, I think that's when they would, even when we were in town, I think that's when we would have more mosquitoes, was a little later. But a few flies. Bees have been probably the primary.
Like wasps.
Yeah, wasps, the primary nuisance. And then there are ticks here that we are trying to be more, protective against. We don't want to mess with that if we can help it.
The good thing is, again, we have friends who live in this area. They were saying, I guess it's really rare for the ticks here to carry disease, which is encouraging to us because there's definitely ticks.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you can avoid getting bit by them, and we don't want to get Lyme disease or something like that, but we also would like to live out here. Like, even if we aren't in a tent, our kids are going to be outdoors a lot in this climate long term. And so, yeah, we're kind of trying to figure that out. That's kind of a bummer that they're here.
It's interesting because even growing up, we had ticks. We would just have ticks in us all the time. Like we would be pulling them out of our skin or out of each other's head. And, to my knowledge, I don't think me or my siblings, got any diseases from it. Like everybody's in my family's in great health, And
we haven't had to pull any off the kids, but I've seen them.
Yes.
Like I've seen them on myself where I've scraped them off.
Yeah.
But we haven't, they haven't burrowed in yet.
Yeah.
So we're keeping an eye out for that. But again, we don't live in the down south area or whatever. There's just lots of bugs. Mm-hmm. You guys see they're kind of flying around, but they aren't real annoying or loud.
Yeah, it hasn't been a huge issue. I know it's really windy right now. Sorry if that's an annoyance on the audio side. But yeah, bugs have not been they're certainly around. And I went and I got a couple of those wasp catcher things, and that's helped. They've filled up. So yeah, they haven't been a real nuisance, but they're certainly around.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, I just wanted to tell you real quick about my homeschooling course, Homeschooling the First 3 Years. It's all about laying a foundation of joy and confidence and fun and simplified homeschool in your home. So if you're in a place where maybe you're considering homeschooling your kiddos in the next few years, then this course is for you. It's going to break down not only what we do for homeschool in our family and what we've done for the first 3 years in homeschool, but it's also going to show you exactly how that looks. So I'm going to take a camera around with me vlog style and show you how does it look to homeschool with a baby? How does it look to homeschool with a toddler? How does it look to homeschool multiple grades at one time? How do you navigate different learning tendencies? How do you navigate your learning style as a teacher? And how do you motivate children and get them to love learning? I love homeschooling my kids. One of my favorite things that I get to do with them each day, and it's something that I want you to love doing with your children as well. So if you look down in the description box, you will be able to find a discount code where you can get a discount off of Homeschool the First 3 Years, and I really hope that it blesses your home. Okay, people want to know plans for winter. Are we going to have a home birth in the tent? There's some concern around what are you guys doing for winter?
Yeah, certainly not planning on having a home birth in the tent. And so, yeah, I know we just kind of like came out of nowhere and we were like, hey, we moved off grid. Nothing about this was like permanent or like this is now the lifestyle we are embracing for none of that at all. Like it, and we view it as like a fun season to experience with our kids. And when we were getting ready to sell our home, we knew that was the impetus. That's what started the whole thing. We wanted to sell our home, and so we were looking at rentals. And then I was trying to look big picture, like, okay, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like what's a better, potential like chapter in our children's life, like when they look back. And there's nothing wrong with renting, obviously. That was certainly a consideration. But I was like, man, I felt like if we had the opportunity to do this, it seemed like it would be great to take advantage of the opportunity for our children's memories, just for a family experience, to grow in capabilities, to grow in a knowledge base. Again, Katie references her tent living days frequently, just different memories or things they learned or how that helped with their creativity and them playing together as siblings. And so we viewed it as like this little window, an opportunity for us to experience living in a tent. And even the off-grid thing wasn't a part of the original plan because we have been working towards getting power to the property. We drilled the well, 4 or 5 months ago, and we were hoping to get a pump soon. And so it just kind of happened that by the time we moved out here, we did not have power. We did not have, running water. And so we're like, well, I guess we're living off grid. And even we don't really know how long it's going to be, but it's not going to be, the plan wasn't to be here off grid for indefinitely. And to like now have this now be our new life. We're viewing it as like a summer excursion because the weather's great. And if it looks like the building that we're, that we're going to have built here is kind of in the ballpark of being finished around Christmas time, then being like, okay, well, let's maybe see how it feels in September. Then let's see how it feels in October. I kind of want to experience the first couple snows,
that's Elisha.
That's just for the sake of doing it. It sounds fun.
That.
It sounds fun to get a wood stove in the tent and live with that. But we're not like committed to it, right? Like,
yeah, like, okay, here's our commitment, okay? Just so you guys know,
yeah.
All right? It's summer.
Yes.
We're committed to summer here. If we have an Indian summer, which we often do in
Yes.
September and October, then we would love to live out here in September and October.
Right.
If it comes in freezing, pouring rain in September and the weather's gnarly and it snows like the 1st of October, which it also has before, then we'd probably consider just getting an Airbnb or moving into a short-term rental.
Yeah.
So the plan is just camping out for the summer. Like, it's actually not that crazy. I was reading below in some of the comments, some of your experiences that you're pretty burned by, living with little kids year round in really tough climates in very small living situations. And that has never been a desire of either of ours, because I do know how hard that can be. And we did live in a fifth wheel, again, where it rained a lot in a climate where it was just not conducive to living in a small space or living outdoors. And it was very difficult for me. I did get depressed there. And it's an experience we don't want to recreate. And we took all that knowledge that we had from that experience, and we knew we never wanted to do that again. And we're like, will this be the same thing? Because if it's the same thing, we don't want to do that. It was very difficult. So not every experience that someone has in a temporary living situation is going to be the same thing. And,
Sure.
and that's kind of what I want to dive into with this whole glorifying hardship bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. Because there's this concern that we're glorifying hardship. And I do think that some people that live year round in like temporary living situations or alternate housing situations really love it. And it can be really great for their family. And again, I experienced doing it for 2 years as a kid and had some of the best memories of my life. So it's not always like what's terrible for one person isn't always terrible for the next family. And also like what climate or what husband's job or what amenities you have or how far out of town you are or all of these things. Like there's so many variables to what will make an experience like this a good experience or a bad experience, that it's really hard to compare apples to apples with these things because they're all really unique. And so when Elisha and I moved out here, like we already said, we had this hierarchy of things we wanted to be in place. And it's like, hey, if this isn't working out, like if I'm getting super stressed out or sick, or Elisha can't get work done and he's stressed out, or the kids don't seem to be thriving, then we're going to change the living situation. Like no one signed in blood that we have to live in a tent.
Right.
So like we aren't, no part of this is something that we're like, this is just this romantic, beautiful life if it's not. We love right now being on this property. Like there's nowhere else we'd rather be. We love sleeping in our tent. It is airy. It is roomy. Yeah, we're still in the honeymoon stage. We're 2 weeks in. And we'll be up front with you guys if it gets really hard. You know, we were in the trailer where we were like, you know what, this was a tough decision. And we've been clear with you guys that we wouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we regretted that decision.
Yeah.
Maybe a month into it or so. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I say we regretted the decision, but then it did enable us to save up to buy our home.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't think regret's the right word, but it's like, I wouldn't do that again.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because you're right. Big picture, we don't regret it because it did enable us to, you know, to save up money for a down payment on the home that we, you know, loved. And so you're right. Regret's not the right word, but it caught us off guard with how challenging it was.
Yeah.
In the midst of it.
And so, you know, I have friends who are living in different alternative temporary situations right now, in different types of dwellings or on different properties that are further out than ours, or intending to do it for multiple years or things like that. And I look at their life and I go, there is no way on earth I would sign on for that.
Yes.
You know? And so it just has to, but this situation, specifically with all the variables we have right now, I'm really happy with.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that are making this not so stressful, and one, it's a total choice, right? So
yeah, we weren't forced into it.
We weren't forced into this. I kept my business going. Our income hopefully is going to stay consistent and solid. I think a lot of times people have worked towards maybe saving up so that they can then, you know, minimize their cost of living, and they just want to live as cheap as possible for as long as possible. And that's, I don't think, what we were put on earth to do. It's like a very defensive, retracting mindset. And that's not our mindset at all. Like, I want to find ways to grow my income, and we want to find ways to grow our capabilities and our impact. And we want to equip our kids to go out into the world. And so I don't think the off-grid, living in a tent setup facilitates that very well. So that was never a part of it was never a long-term solution. I think that this is a very fun, like I said, chapter or season in our children's life, but I don't think for, you know, I would even use that language that people, talked about earlier in the podcast. Like I feel like God has called us to things that living in a tent does not facilitate very well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And
it is harder to do things we feel like He's called us to do impact-wise and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And just, looking at what our families have done before us, where kind of like the generational faith, where our story has kind of started in the narrative of our families and in the church. I'm like, okay, I'm thinking that the Lord's leading us in this direction, and the long-term off-grid living is not that direction at all.
But the funny thing is we do feel like it speeds up the process to getting to where we ultimately do feel called to.
Exactly.
And so we feel like this period in time is something that we feel a lot of peace about, because it expedites things that we would like to be a part of. And Elisha said this is a choice, and it's like you said, nothing. We have the money to go get a different housing situation.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're stuck here.
Right.
If something goes wrong, or if it's like, this just wasn't what we hoped it would be, this is unhealthy for us, we can change it.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of freedom in that.
Yep.
We didn't even have that same freedom really in Coeur d'Alene, when we were living on the fifth wheel, because it was during COVID, the intense lockdown time.
Yes.
And so like homes weren't selling, renters weren't renting, in terms of like evictions weren't happening.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of availability. We didn't have as much, as flexible of funding.
Yes.
And so it was just, there weren't as many options for us, and we didn't even know where we wanted to live. And Elisha's job was location based at the time. And so there was just a lot of things that were outside of our control, a little bit more there, that made us feel a little more stuck.
Yeah.
And made it more stressful, because when you feel like you don't have a choice, then it's more stressful. Another thing is Elisha's not building our home. He's not, he's not the guy we're like relying on to build the property. So he's keeping the finances coming in. But I think that that's another stress that a lot of people mention is like you're waiting to build your own house or whatever.
Oh, sure.
And those timelines can be very long when you're the one doing it. And so if that's something you're aligned in as a couple and it's awesome, that's great. But we also have a traditional building team that's coming in and carrying all the stress of that. So we aren't trying to do that and live and work and
exactly,
raise
because that
the
would be
kids.
crazy stressful. That would really hinder my ability to provide financially for my family if I had to. One, I don't have the knowledge base, right? And so it would take 10 times as long and cost 10 times as much probably as it is going to by hiring a professional and somebody that's an expert. And then just all the logistics that our general contractors doing for us, right? Like piecing everything together. That would be it would be my full-time occupation. And instead, yeah, there's a few things here and there I need to answer some questions.
You do a lot,
meet some people.
actually.
But the majority of my like mental energy is like towards providing and then towards just kind of like having a comfortable setup here in our tent. And so I could see how that would feel like you were kind of trapped for a season. I was like, man, all of my time and energy is going into just existing and we're bleeding money and money's not coming in. That would be that would be tough. Yeah.
That'd be really stressful. So anyways, all those things to say, we don't want to encourage anyone to be like, really with any aspect of our life, like, oh, Katie and Elisha are doing it. They're saying it's a great experience. I'm going to go do it too. Like your variables are not our variables.
Yeah.
And so we will be upfront with you guys. Know that if the going gets tough and we bail out, we have no problem saying we were wrong. This wasn't the best decision. Even if, it's been a good 3 weeks, we will have enjoyed it. We enjoy having this place on the property. And also, like our goal is never to romanticize or glorify hardship, but also I don't think there's anything wrong in having a hardship either.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that like seeks out difficult situations to feel like a martyr. I'm perfectly fine with comfort, but I do think in America we glorify comfort as well. And our intention in doing this is not to make anyone feel bad for living in a home and saying, hey, I'd never do this, because I don't blame you. And unless the circumstances lined up just right, we'd never do it either. But it's fun and we're enjoying it. And we also feel confident in being able to say that truthfully. Like,
yeah, exactly.
We aren't going to apologize for something that has been good and that we're enjoying either.
Yes.
So,
I think it's been helpful too, because I know my father has spoken to different seasons in. So what I was going to say actually, and I'll finish that story about my father, but is kind of like it's going to the why. Like why are you doing this? What's the point in are you running from something that you shouldn't be running from? Are you trying to escape responsibility that when actually that responsibility is probably a good thing? I remember so vividly, it was when we were pregnant with our second, we were pregnant with our second, and I was working at the restaurant and I was trying to be a realtor. And I fortunately had a deal going, right? So I got this listing and I was so excited to have a listing, but then I was also still working at the restaurant. And I can remember, it was kind of a busy shift. I had multiple tables that I was trying to serve, and my phone just kept going off in my pocket, off in my pocket, off in my pocket. And the buyer's agent that had brought an offer was just livid because of my lack of responsiveness, right? Like the listing had gone active that morning. My shift started at 3 p.m. and now it's like 9, and he had been and like I was just ghosting everybody trying to get answers to this. And I felt then they got in touch with my managing broker, which was crazy. So then my principal broker was contacting me. They went by me. My principal broker contacted the actual seller at this point. Like, hey, what happened to your agent? And I was just like so embarrassed and so stressed out. And I was back in this place in the restaurant, we called it the cave. It's like where you put all your stuff, and I had my phone and it was blowing up, and then my tables that were all, upset at me. And I can remember my goal at that point. I was like, my goal in life is to never feel this stress again. Like I hate this stress so much. And that was like a motivator for me for so long, was to not feel stress. And it's funny because sure, I was able to get to a place where I didn't feel that stress, but I think I came full circle in realizing like stress and responsibility is not something to be running from. you just want to be you want it to be for a good reason, for a good cause, for a good purpose. And so I say that all to say I hope I'm not running from responsibility. That's certainly not my goal in any of this. We're not trying to do that as a family. And I think that can be a motivator for a lot of people, is like they never want to have a boss again. They don't want to have to answer to so-and-so, and they can run from that. And the reason I brought up my dad is because he's been through seasons like that, and he would always reference those when I was older, living at home when I was older. And, a season where he was ready to pack up the whole family, sell our home, sell everything, and move to this rural part of the state. And when he really looked at his motivation, it was like some relational strain with his father, that he's like, well, that's not a good reason, like because of the hierarchy too of just kind of like his values. He's like, I actually do want to honor my dad, and I want to reconcile with my father. And then also just like he was running from having to what he felt like were just like these social pressures and anxieties, instead of like finding a solution to them. And again, that was his unique scenario. And so he would always mention that anytime he felt the impulse or the compulsion to run, to head for the hills, to flee. It's like, well, what's your motivation? And we certainly don't want our motivation to be, like I said, fleeing or running from responsibility, or just checking out or bugging out, or just hunkering down and isolating ourselves with our kids. Because that's not, we want to have a much longer term mindset than that. It might be fun for us as parents to like be with our kids 24/7 on a property, but that's not what's best for our kids long term. We want them to develop. We want them to be social. We want them to, have connections and relationships.
On the social aspect, we actually know a ton of people where we live, and we've seen people every single day. We're more social out here than we've been in town. I'm like, I think we need to work on this, actually.
Yes.
We've been a little too social. But anyway, so that's a few of your questions. I also think, too, when it comes to glorifying hardship, it's really easy to put our hardships on someone else maybe and be like, this is what they're experiencing. They're just not telling me this. And I really felt that way when I dated a guy, dated another guy, broke up, and it was just like, I really felt jaded with like, couples aren't actually happy. They don't have good marriages. They aren't content. There's tons of skeletons in every closet, and you just have to grin and bear it and have kids and find your purpose somewhere outside your spouse, and like that hasn't been my experience with Elisha, and so I think it's really easy to just put our assumptions of like, because I lived through this and it went terrible for me, they aren't telling us that it's terrible for them, but it is.
Well, I have that when I see people living in a trailer or whatever.
Yeah, I do too.
Because I was just kind of like, I don't know if I buy that. Like,
are you really enjoying it in that little tiny no window place?
Exactly. So I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really easy to do as people. And so I think there's that. But then also, you don't always know what hardship people are leaving either. And so it's like, one of our episodes that we've actually done twice is Becoming Your Dream Home. And in the suburb, we really wanted to not wait to have a dream home, but to just become it and to value the things that we valued and see what we could get out of just the space we were in and the blessings of that. But that is something that actually we've left a lot of hardship, I should say, that we were experiencing in the suburb when we moved out here.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to raise 5 children on a larger piece of land than in our very tiny backyard. It's a lot easier to be able to keep an eye on the kids actually on this piece of land than it was. We had kind of a secondary living situation. So the only way to access the backyard was a really steep porch. So I could never really see what the kids were doing outside. So it was very separated, I guess, from the home. And
and the front yard was it was very high traffic with other neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
And there was a wide range of, characteristics and qualities in these neighborhood kids.
Well, most of them were terrible. And that's the sad thing. It was a great mission field, but it was really lame that our kids could be outside for 3 minutes and they would hear something. They would come in asking a question, where I was just like, that's such a bummer. We're having to talk about that right now. Yeah. And we didn't live in an area where there were great children, unfortunately. And so that's something we don't have to have out here. We're surrounded by a lot of Christian families that are raising our children in a way that like is so refreshing when our children play with these children. And it can just be this awesome fun. And they aren't talking about these adult topics or these really off-color topics. And so those are big gifts for us.
Right.
You know, even the heat in our home. We didn't have AC in our home. So it's summer out here in the tent, in the shade, when our tent's in the shade, the majority of the day is actually way cooler and way easier than it was in our home.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're considering all these things when we're thinking, should we move out to this place, you know? Summer out here has a high percentage chance of being easier than it was in our home.
Yes.
So just know that. It's not like, oh, well, when you're in the suburb, clearly you're comfortable. You might be, you might not be in a situation like this, might be actually taking away some of those pain points, even though it's maybe trading them with different ones. In our case, we felt the trade-off was something we wanted to do. Anyways, that's it. You guys are wondering too about like long-term building plans and stuff like that. And we'll just fill you guys in as stuff happens because projections are projections.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't count your chickens before they hatch.
I do know what you mean. Were you asking me? It's like, I mean, the thing is that we've got a phenomenal builder. He's a great communicator. He's like a Christian man with awesome integrity.
He is.
Yeah. And so it's like we're extremely comfortable with the whole situation we're in, but we're like, we also just know that it's stuff gets held up, you know, and
we don't know timelines. We have projected timelines, but we'll just let you know when it actually happens so you guys aren't on the roller coaster with us. Yeah. And then there's other things too in terms of like long-term development of the property. We're going to see what each stage brings. Yes. You know, as finances allow, as our energy levels allow, as we feel like the Lord's leading our family. And so those are things that we're kind of playing by ear.
Yeah. We do know that. So the first structure we're building is not like a traditional home. It's going to be like a barn house thing, you know, like the barn dominium.
Barn house thing. So basically we're going to have full-blown barn downstairs and upstairs is full living. Yeah. So I kind of had a situation like that in high school in our barn. We converted the upstairs of our barn to full living. We've seen people do it, you know, where like half of the downstairs structure is a shop and the other part is a like a studio style apartment. And I really wanted to feel comfortable in the barn because we don't know how long we're going to be in there. And so it is going to be big enough. I was like, if we have more babies, stuff like that, I don't want to be stressed out in this living situation. Like, we built this cracker box in the studio. When's the main house going to be built? Like, I just want to be comfortable there, be able to host there. And so it's not going to be very tiny. And it's also going to be, I just wanted it all on one level. Right. Yeah. Kind of like, it felt like there'd be more separation from the barn to the living versus like when there's a door that goes into people's we've stayed in, I just prefer the complete separation. So it's kind of funny because we're going back to second story living in terms of the yard and everything like that. So I might spend more time downstairs too in the barn. We'll see. Good point. Yeah. But so that is what we are working on building currently. Yes. And we do have a timeline for that. So we do know idealistically when that would be done, but again, a lot of stuff with the city and stuff like that's outside of our control, weather. But that is the plan. So, and I mean, with people who are asking, well, why didn't you guys just stay in your house until you had a permanent structure built and stuff? We talked that through for sure. And again, we just thought we'd prefer summer out here. Yeah. So that's why I made that decision. We should probably wrap it up. Yeah. Folks, thank you all so much for listening. Again, if you have any further questions, we love reading them in the question box. So, we'll link that below. But we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.